And welcome back. Student Debt Crisis is a not-for-profit organization that's dedicated to fundamentally reforming student debt and higher education loan policies. Student Debt Crisis takes on a personal approach, I should say, to member needs, actually working directly with borrowers to understand their challenges and fears, repayment obstacles, as well as frustrations. Joining us now to share a little bit more about the student debt crisis and also student debt forgiveness was something that Joe Biden has talked about in his campaign. We'll talk about that in just a few seconds. We're pleased to be joined by the Program Director of Student Debt Crisis, Cody Hounanian, and we thank you, Cody, for being with us.
Thank you, Darren. I appreciate the opportunity. And as you mentioned, there's a lot to be talked about right now related to student loan forgiveness, or what we call cancellation. So this is a great time to talk about this topic.
Well, we'll get right into it. I mean, obviously, let's go front and center with what's political. We do have a new president-elect Joe Biden. He's been very outspoken talking about student debt and student debt forgiveness, talking about possibly forgiving $10,000 of debt for students, and then also for the rest who attend public colleges or historically Black colleges and university that earn about $125,000 a year. Having a new president-elect and the work that you do, are you optimistic that we can see this forgiveness happen real soon?
I'm unbelievably optimistic about the opportunity to have large amount of student debt canceled, and also excited for the opportunity to have an administration that will work with us after debt cancellation to make sure that we address all the student loan debt in America, that we make college free so we don't have another student debt crisis in the future. All of these are possibilities with the Joe Biden administration. And, I have to give the president-elect a lot of credit. When he started this campaign, his platform on student debt and higher education wasn't what it is today. His beliefs have evolved, and that's because he's listening to advocates. And more importantly, Joe Biden is listening to the millions of Americans that are crushed by student debt and now also impacted by the COVID-19 crisis as well.
Yeah. And when we talk about debt reform, obviously before COVID-19, millions of Americans have actually struggled with student debt. I remember hearing former President Obama talk about it took him until his presidency to pay off loans. If this is supposed to be something we're supposed to be doing here in America, gaining an education, the process of having to pay this off, it becomes so tumultuous in the life of a person. Talk to us about, your work and what this does and how you're trying to help to give some relief to some people who are very highly impacted.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it at the beginning of this segment, Darren. We do work personally with student loan borrowers. We talk to hundreds or thousands of people impacted by this crisis every year. And there's stories that stick with me. We worked with a gentleman here in Sacramento to pass legislation, and he was someone who spoke at the state legislature. And this is someone who was had a master's degree, someone who was a pastor, a faith leader, and had their life crushed by student loan debt. Their retirement was impacted. Their Social Security was being withheld. This was an older gentleman. This person's entire life was hurt by the crisis. That's why, again, we are thrilled that an administration is coming into place that cares about these stories. Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos, not only were they not allies to student loan borrowers, they were attacking student loan borrowers. They were preventing them from getting access to programs that are written into the law. So we're going to have allies in the White House again. And we also have, most importantly, a lot of allies in Congress as well. So, we're really excited. Even today, before we filmed, Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer tweeted out their support for canceling a large amount of student loan debt, not only to help people impacted by COVID, not only to stimulate the economy, but also this other element, which is really addressing the racial disparities that exist in our higher education system, the wealth gap that is persistent out there. Student debt cancellation can help heal the country on all of these fronts.
Yeah. Talk to us about from a social justice perspective, because I do feel like when we talk about this, there is an issue of social justice attached to student loan debt. How do you view it? And how would you make an argument for that?
I'm glad that you brought that up. Let's start with the problem. The problem here is a student loan debt crisis, and the problem itself is distributed disproportionately amongst students of color. So we know Black women, they have more student loan debt per student than any other group. We also know, because of the persistent wealth and wage gap, that we see students of color and particularly Black students pursue graduate degrees at a higher rate. A lot of people don't know that our students of color are some of the most ambitious and successful students that exist. But when you go further down your education track, that means a lot more student loan debt. And what is also a persistent problem is these predatory for-profit colleges. These are the schools that have given people tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt and then offer them a degree that is virtually useless when it comes to accessing a high-paying job. So all three of those issues combined are partly why we see a disproportionate student debt crisis. Now, on the other end of this is the opportunity for debt cancellation to be a powerful equalizer. And so what we see is that not only will student debt cancellation lift the debt burden off of students of color's back, meaning they can take on other healthy debts like a mortgage, pay off credit card debts, just be more financially secure. But we also know that students of color have smaller debt totals. So when we're talking to advocates and we're trying to figure out how much student debt should be canceled for per borrower, we don't need that much. Anywhere from $5,000, $10,000 to $20,000 would wipe clean the student debt burden for most of the students of color who are in distress and unable to afford their student loan debt.
Yeah, I think sometimes we do get the numbers confused because we say, hey, it's an astronomical amount of debt. But you just said $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 is a simple thing that's really needed in order to get somebody's life right back on track.
That's exactly it. And if we go as far as what Senator Schumer and Warren are proposing, which is $50,000 in debt cancellation, that wipes clean a large majority of the student loan debt for most people in general. And the impact is huge for these students of color that have lower debt totals, but are having a larger difficulty paying it off.
Yeah.
So we're thinking big. We are ambitious at Student Debt Crisis. We want to have the most relief possible, but we also know that a little bit will go a long way when it comes to fixing and making up for what has been this immoral and unethical student debt crisis.
Yeah. You referenced earlier Senator Liz Warren, Senator Chuck Schumer going and saying in favor, tweeting out in favor. Talk to me about political help and political allies. Are you finding more and more political allies beginning to line up now in this area? I know for a lot of people, they were hard and fast no, but you talked about President-elect Joe Biden evolving. Are we seeing more other people begin to evolve?
I'm so glad you brought that up. We are so thrilled about this opportunity to achieve student debt cancellation explicitly because we are seeing more allies and partners join on. So first off, on the grassroots advocacy side, student debt crisis, we've been banging the drum for years that this is a crisis, but we're seeing organizations from civil rights groups, consumer rights groups, from student-oriented and campus organizations all take on this crisis, and now they want to make a big difference. Also, you nailed it. We have allies in Congress like we've never seen before. I have to give credit to Senator Schumer as the minority leader. He is really pushing the party to think boldly about student debt cancellation. I take it seriously. When Senator Schumer says that he wants to cancel student debt, that is a huge win for this movement, and it means a lot to have this minority leader join this cause. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. Share with me a little bit about COVID-19, how that's actually impacted the work that you're doing, and there's also the life of students who are really trying to deal with this whole thing about debt relief. Somebody may not know how there's relief involved, and also a little bit of a delay, if you will, in terms of if you got a problem with paying it off, how that works out for those who have dealing with COVID-19.
Yeah, the COVID pandemic has really turned this issue, this problem upside down for so many student loan borrowers. So in March, when this crisis really became a national emergency, the first thing we did was get to action to make sure people understood their options. So in the last six months or more, we've been hosting free student loan clinics online with some partners like a tech startup called Savvy, to make sure that people understand their rights and enroll in the programs that can make their payments affordable during this really difficult time. So that's another element of student debt crisis's work. It's not just advocacy. We need to educate and inform people as well. And that's one of our missions.
Yeah.
But on top of that, COVID-19 is, as we all know is disproportionately impacting many communities that are already vulnerable. So the second part of our mission was, let's find out what's going on here. How are people being impacted? And so we did a survey of 40,000 student loan borrowers, and we found out that Black and brown students were the least likely to know that they had repayment options or that there was COVID-19 specific relief that was passed by Congress. We found that older borrowers were facing unique challenges when it came to supporting small businesses. So we're seeing this crisis, the COVID-19 health crisis, bump right up against what was already the student debt crisis, and it's impacting communities in many unique different ways, and they all need to be addressed separately.
I think you touched upon this just a second ago when you talked about knowing your rights and some of the common mistakes that people make. And they make mistakes because simply a lot of people just simply don't know their rights. What are some of the common rights that people have that maybe we don't know?
Yeah, Daren, that's a great point. You know, before the crisis even started, people already had difficulty understanding their student loan options. Now, since the COVID-19 pandemic began, we've seen rapidly changing policies at the federal level that have changed when people will make their payments. There's been a 6-month plus pause on student loan payments. A lot of borrowers were confused by that. And so in January 1st, federal student loans will be sent back to repayment unless Congress or the next administration extends this payment relief. So we are going to have millions of Americans go back to student loan repayment after months of reprieve during the pandemic. And so they need to know that they have rights. And that includes something called income-driven repayment. That's a federal program where a borrower can have their monthly payment lowered based on what their income is. And it can be as little as $0 a month if they have low income. There are other options as well. Public service loan forgiveness is a forgiveness program for people who work as social workers, teachers, nurses, firefighters. That program is critical, but 99% of people who enroll are denied because of minor paperwork or enrollment issues. So they need to know about that program. And lastly, there are other federal consumer protections. There's protections for people who are disabled, protections for veterans. All of these programs are really powerful, but borrowers need to know about them to take advantage of them.
So let's talk about this for a second. A lot of people make mistakes. The time to recover from those mistakes previously in time past has been a long period. Are we looking at possibly seeing a slower, or I should say, better options for those who may have a hard time navigating this whole repaying, the debt issue, the weight that just comes with it? Do you think that things are really looking better?
Well, you know, for borrowers that have been feeling the sense of hopelessness for years, I think this bold policy proposal of enacting debt cancellation is a light at the end of the tunnel for so many people. If you feel like your legislators or those in Washington, D.C. haven't been listening to you because you have student loan debt, this is a big, big plan that shows a serious commitment to addressing this issue. And so that alone, I think, will give people a great feeling about what is possible and what we can do to address this crisis. Now, I know that's not going to take off the burden of student debt off the backs of many people. There will still be millions of Americans that have student loan debt. What I'm optimistic about is that bold solutions like debt cancellation bring this issue to the national debate. It means that people are talking about their student loan debt. They're talking about the federal programs that exist. There's more just general awareness about people's federal student loan options when we talk about this as a big problem where there's bold solutions. And so for that reason, I think for those that will still have student loan debt after a limited amount of student debt relief, if passed, there's still hope that this discussion will be something that's talked about very seriously at the policy level.
Finally, if I'm a parent or a student, I'm watching this interview and I'm saying, listen, I want to tap into Cody and some of the stuff that he's doing. Talk to us about how the public can tap in.
Oh, Darren, I'm so glad you said it. Student Debt Crisis can connect with us. If you're interested in connecting with Student Debt Crisis, you can visit our website. It's www.studentdebtcrisis.org. And I like that you mentioned it's not just students, it's parents, it's friends and family that are impacted by the health and mental stress of student loan debt. We are all in this together as a country, and we can all be a part of addressing the student debt crisis. So join our movement, visit our website, and also follow us on Twitter as well, where we're constantly giving up the most up-to-date policy updates, because I know things are changing fast.
Things are indeed changing fast. And Cody, we want to thank you for sharing with us here on the Social Justice Forums. Thanks much.
Thank you, Darren. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All righty. Cody Hounanian, our guest here on the Social Justice Forums.